Welcome back to my kitchen. Today we're making baking powder biscuits. I've got both a large and a small recipe attached to the video, and I'm making the small recipe today. This uses just very basic ingredients that are in your pantry, and the wonderful thing about this is you can make up the biscuits, cut them out, don't bake them, put them on a cookie sheet and freeze them, and then put them in a Ziploc bag. You can pull them out one at a time or however many you need and bake them from frozen, and they are just like if you made them fresh. I tried that this morning and they were great, and in fact I tried it letting one thaw and baking that one as well to see whether from frozen or thawed was better, and I actually liked the from frozen better. The first thing you're going to do is preheat your oven to 450. Then we've got 1 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour here, and we have 2½ teaspoons of baking powder and 3/4 teaspoon of just regular salt. Now I'm going to give this a real quick mix just to get those combined. The next thing we're going to use is 1/3 cup of shortening, and we'll just put that dollop in here. And then we will use a whisk. You can also use 2 just regular table knives and use that. You just cut like this to cut them together, but I find that I kind of like the whisk better, and I do have to unclog it probably 2 or 3 times, but I find that it just comes together really fast. And what you're looking for is you're looking for little pea-sized pieces of shortening that are coated in flour. And that's going to give you nice flaky biscuits. This is the same technique that you would use if you were making scones, and I mean British style scones, not American or Utah style fried dough scones. But we just quickly combine these, and you can see how quickly I get little pea-sized ones. If you end up with ones that are the size of, say, a chickpea or, garbanzo bean, that's maybe a little bit too big, but I just want regular pea-sized ones, just like that. And then I've got 3/4 cup of milk. Now, if you're trying to rotate your emergency food storage and you have an open package of milk, you can use powdered milk in any baking recipe. You're just going to combine the powdered milk unreconstituted, however much you would need for the amount of liquid that you need. Put the powder in with your flour and mix that up with your dry ingredients. And you can see it's starting to come together, but there's maybe a little bit in the bottom that is still a little dry. And you don't want to have any pools of any flour in the bottom. So I just drizzle a little extra water in there until I don't have any dry in the bottom. If it's not well hydrated enough, you're going to end up with very kind of crumbly biscuits, and that's kind of not worth your time. So you want it just moist enough, but not too moist. So you can see in the bottom of my bowl, everything is moist, but nothing is wet. And you don't want it like cookie dough. You don't want it to be all completely homogenized. You want to retain those little flecks of shortening in there. So now I'm going to take and I'm going to flour my board here just a little bit. You don't want too much. And if you overmix or put too much flour in, they can end up being tough from overmixing, or they can be dry and crumbly, as I mentioned. And I'll just get a little flour on my hands, and I just want this to come together. I'm not going to knead it like you would bread. I just want it to come together. So I form it, and I tend to like to make more of a rectangle. So I'm going to roll this out, and you can see there's wrinkles on the top, and that's totally fine. So I'll roll this out a little bit and grab my cutter. So I'm going to cut this This small recipe using a 2.5-inch cutter is going to make about 7. Now you can see how thick this is. This is maybe a little bit too thin. I like them a little thicker, and that is because it keeps them from drying out. So if I need to make the dough a little thicker, I just squish it. And I can even put this one back in if I needed to. I'm not going to take the time to do that right now. But then I cut them, and now I can already feel this one's just right. So you can see how thick this is. This is at least 3/4 of an inch, probably closer to an inch. And they're going to be better if they're thicker because then they don't dry out. So I cut them like this. Then I want to kind of dust away any extra flour so I don't accidentally work that in. And press this and roll it out again until I get all 7 of them rolled out. Then you'll put them on a cookie sheet. You don't want them necessarily touching, but they can be about a 1/2 inch apart if your cookie sheet is a little on the small side. And bake them for 10 to 12 minutes. You want to take them out when they are light brown. And I've got an example of the color that they should be, just barely golden. And I wouldn't go any darker than this. I've actually baked some, even just an extra minute or 2 makes a big difference. So take them out when they're a little bit light. These, not only can you freeze them, but I bake some extra whenever I make them and keep them in a Ziploc bag, and they will last for a couple of days. And that's because I used shortening and not butter. Shortening is actually 100% fat. It really has no flavor whatsoever. A lot of people like to use butter, and it does impart a wonderful flavor, but it's only, American butter is only 80% fat, and then it's 20% water. So that 20% water evaporates off. And it's also harder to store butter for your food storage. So if you want to keep a canister or a tub of Crisco in your pantry so that you have it in an emergency, that's a good thing to do. Even though it's a trans fat, you still need some fats in your diet in an emergency, and you can rotate that on a very limited basis. That's what we do, is just keep enough so that we have it in an emergency. And this is a great way to rotate that without it going rancid. It does keep for quite a while, but you can rotate it and you can have it in your pantry just in case you need it in times like this where we're being discouraged from going to the store when at all possible. So if you have any questions, text me or email me, and I'll be happy to answer them for you. I hope you enjoyed making this, and as Jacques Pepin says, happy cooking.